Drake Martin blinked, trying to keep his focus on the blood dripping from his nose onto the concrete floor so he didn't pass out from the pain. The red seemed abnormally bright, as if it were in Technicolor, against the room's stark bleached floor. Outside, the raging wind whipped into a screeching frenzy every few minutes, rattling the wooden walls of the hunting shack and sending icy pricks of air through the cracks. Then, he heard a sound that sent a shiver down his spine. The howling of wolves. He shook his head to clear it, and the sound was gone. The inside of the squat building, situated about 100 miles northwest of Moscow, felt even colder than the Arctic-blasted wildlands outside. Movement in the shadows. Instinctively, he pulled at the restraints that bound him to the metal chair, knowing it was futile, then braced himself for another swift punch or kick that would send more blood splattering across the floor. But no blows came. Beside him, Josh cleared his throat. Drake snuck a look at his colleague, who was also bound to a metal chair. Josh was unrecognizable. His face looked like raw ground beef, seeping bloody juices, and his eyeballs resembled runny eggs. Drake swallowed back bile that rose in his throat. "Keep quiet," Drake yelled inside his head. But it was too late. "I'm an American citizen," Josh said through swollen, cracked lips. "You can't do this." The words brought on a fresh attack, a deliberate, well-executed lashing with a thick metal chain. Fresh blood spurted from Josh's mouth, spraying more red on the floor in front of them. Feeling as if he was betraying his colleague, Drake turned his head away. He couldn't help Josh. He couldn't even help himself. Maybe they would have a shot if they had an inkling of what these Russian mobsters wanted, but so far, any pleas and questions had only sparked further beatings. With his chin tucked down, Drake's eyes fell on his now shredded dress shirt. His wife had sent him the shirt a few weeks ago for Christmas. Even though he told her they could afford designer clothes now, he knew she still had scrimped and cut back on groceries for weeks to purchase the Christian Dior shirt that was now in tatters and stained with blood and other bodily fluids. It was ruined. She was going to kill him. He gave a strangled laugh at the absurdity of his thoughts, triggering a hard smack against his head that sent his vision reeling. He heard the sound again. Wolves howling. He was losing it. It wouldn't be much longer before he simply gave up. He'd already offered to do anything the two men wanted, but they had kept eerily silent throughout the ordeal. In fact, they hadn't said a word since yanking him and Josh from their vehicle, just outside the walls of the Cryer Plastics plant. The pair had been making a quick trip to the nearby village to appease complaints about dense smoke from the plant operations. They had just rounded the corner from the compound's guard towers when two armed men jumped out of nowhere and held guns to them. The men had tied them up, gagged them, blindfolded them, and stuffed them in the back seat of their company-owned SUV before driving them to wherever this god-forsaken room was located. Once inside the frigid room, the gags and blindfolds had been removed, and they'd been strapped to heavy metal chairs bolted to the floor. Without a word of explanation, the two mobsters had begun beating the two Cryer executives. A bare light bulb above them cast an interrogation-like circle of dim light that made it impossible for Drake to see much. That meant he could never anticipate a new beating. They always caught him off guard. Each time, when the mobster stepped forward into the light, it was as if a specter struck him, and then retreated into the shadowy bowels of hell. It took a few moments for Drake to realize that the two men had paused their attack for longer than usual. He lifted his head and searched the darkness beyond the circle of light, narrowing his eyes, but unable to see anything but shimmering shadows. The pause was almost more frightening than the attacks. What were they gearing up for? An expectant silence fell across the room. "What do you want?" he said, knowing that his words would provoke another attack, but no longer caring. It was inconceivable that he or Josh had anything these guys would want. They were brought to the Cryer Plastics plant as pencil-pushing engineers who managed the plant while the CEO was out of town. The wind started up again, and as it wailed, Drake heard something else. This time, he was certain. It was the howl of a wolf, or several wolves, and it was growing closer. Then, the door to the hunting shack swung open, and he watched the two rebel fighters walk out. The door slammed shut.